background on where my question is coming from. I was involved with a project with a youth theater group where we created a skit about suicide. I went into schools and presented it, and that was an interesting experience because there were a lot of barriers against even bringing this topic into schools. And then last year I was a resident assistant in a residence at Dow, and part of my training was how to, something very similar to Safe Talk, that we all had to go through because suicide attempts and suicide itself is very, very, very prevalent in residences in all universities. There were actually 3 attempts on my floor alone last year. So it's not that I can't talk about it and that I am prepared to address it. What scares me the most is once that situation is over, once they have their support and they're moving on, how do I let go of the intensity of the emotion and the intensity of the situation that happened? That's what scares me, is I don't know if I can let it go. And this is going to be something that I will deal with as a nurse as well, and it's, you can't always talk about it because of confidentiality, and you have to protect your patient's privacy. So I'm asking you for maybe some tips or advice on how can we let go and how do we deal with our own emotions after we've helped somebody.
Especially as a nurse, it's interesting when we look at the regulations that we work on confidentiality. If you were at work and you had a physical injury at work, there's set parameters that you follow and get cared for and treat. When we look at the mental health side of it, that's tied to your job. It's not there. They're all physical injuries, you know, So I think what we need to start looking at from a workplace scenario is looking at the jobs that you're doing. Even as an RA, I would say the same thing. That's job. And the support that you need for that is mental health. But yet when we look at it, that's not available. We don't, it's not even listening. Look at my boards at work, all based on physical injuries. If you get injured, do this, this, this. Nothing about the scenario you just gave me that, okay, now I'm feeling overwhelmed, now I'm feeling, how do I get rid of it? How do I deal with this? It's not there. And so I've actually been photographing the posters at work wherever we go in workplaces because it's all physical, physical, physical. And your scenario is a perfect one. What are we doing about it? And it's very real. And just recently there was a document that was put out in workplace mental health. And I think that's a big step in moving towards that, is realizing how do you do that. Like even myself as a pilot, I have calls right now that are PTSD potential is enormous. Our culture is, oh, you're okay, we're talking. Next call. I know it doesn't help a lot, but that's what we have to work towards, is having that mental health support. It's interesting, just going back to a question before when somebody was talking about the word commit. And that's it's a big part of what I talk about, and I didn't include it today. But the word commit, people, whenever I would use the word commit suicide, the only people who would talk to me are people who had lost people to murders or suicide. When I started using the phrase, my father died by suicide, anybody would be welcome to talk. They talk about losing parents to cancer, to other disease. The language changes everything. It truly does, and I forget who brought it up. It was a fantastic point that's important to make. I tend to forget about it nowadays, but language. When you look at your documentation at school, see the word commit, look at how it changes.
Sorry to end the questions, but they need this room. But Scott will be available just outside in a few minutes. But thank you very much, Scott.